Hey everybody, welcome into the Shelby County High School Football Show. We're out here at Thompson High School to get you ready for round 2 of the 2019 playoffs. And in week 1, we saw some great action, and with 5 teams that made the postseason from Shelby County, 4 of those teams playing on their home field. So it was a special first week of the 2019 postseason, but unfortunately only 2 of our teams have advanced on to round 2, and those 2 teams, one of them right here at Thompson High School, the Warriors, they advance on with a big victory, a dominant victory over Austin last week. We'll talk more about that game here in just a minute, and that's going to be our game of the week out here, as well as the Warriors will play host to Florence, a rematch of last year's first round playoff game for Thompson. So we'll talk a little bit more about that game, break it down, give you everything you need to know going into round 2 for the Thompson Warriors. And the other team that advanced, the Briarwood Lions, who have been playing some great football over the last several weeks of the season, and they picked up a dominant win in the first round themselves with a big victory over the Marbury Bulldogs. And we'll talk about that game and look ahead to what they have coming up with a big road trip about 3 hours away down south to Jackson for round 2 of the postseason. So plenty to touch on, and we'll talk about both of those games extensively, break everything down that we need to get you informed on ahead of those second round matchups. But the 3 other teams, that valiant efforts and great seasons from these 3 teams as they face some tough times at different points, were able to bounce back. But those 3 teams that did make the postseason unfortunately fell in the first round. That's going to be Helena, Chelsea, and Montevallo, and we'll talk and recap just a little bit about those 3 teams real quick. And if you look at what Helena did, they just drew an extremely tough draw, with Clay Chalkville, and that was a Clay Chalkville team, the only team that beat Oxford this season. And like I've said several times, Oxford's a team that could win a state championship. They've already won their region championship, and they picked up a pretty dominant and easy win against Chelsea in the first round. But for the Helena Huskies this season, what a special year it was for them. What a ride for this senior class. Several firsts in school history. They're able to beat Pelham for the first time, able to win their first region championship, finish undefeated in region play, and go on to host just their second ever playoff game this past Friday night. They do end up losing 17-0, and early in that first half, you could just kind of sense, you knew it was going to be a defensive battle going in with 2 teams that pride themselves in defense and love to run the football. And Helena had a chance early on, but they fumbled on the 1-yard line. That would have given them a 7-0 lead. Unfortunately, they go on in the second half to give up 17 unanswered points to drop that game 17-0. But nonetheless, that senior class there for the Huskies did some special things in just 2 years under head coach Richie Busby, too, as he kind of tries to set the standard for the program moving forward. This senior class bought into him last year. They fought last year, and the way they ended the season, you knew they had some momentum coming into this year. You knew it was going to be a special year, and it sure was for Helena. I can't wait to see what the future holds for that program by the standard that they set this season. For the Chelsea Hornets, it was difficult. Friday night was difficult. There's no way around that. They lose 55-14 to Oxford, but that seriously is an Oxford team that could win a state championship this year. They've got an experienced coach that's won several state championships in his past, and a team that's just talented and loaded all over the place, and they showed it. They win 55-14. Chelsea season comes to an end, but this is a team, remember guys, this is a team that at one point in the season had a chance to sit. They were sitting in first in the region at one point, and then that 3-point loss to Helena, that set forth 3 consecutive losses by 3 points or less. And if you look at that stretch of football, if they win those 3 games, they win the region championship. So in just 2 years out there under head coach Dustin Goodwin, it's been a transformation in those 2 years. So it's something that these guys have to look at in a positive way, and I expect them to do that. They took major strides this year. Quarterback Caleb Moore, he was able to step up throughout the season and just grew tremendously from start to finish. So did several other players. One of the best defenses Chelsea's had in a while as well. And what can you say about running back Collier Blair, who continues to impress every week? He'll be back next year on this team as well. So big things, I believe, in Chelsea's future under Dustin Goodwin. I think they're going to have a positive year in 2020 as well with what this class, kind of like Helena, was able to set for the future. And speaking of the future, we don't know what's going to happen with the Montevallo Bulldogs, but they lose a very difficult and heartbreaking first-round game last Friday night. And it was possibly the most heartbreaking game that I've covered this year, just from a standpoint of knowing these guys that are on that team that they've poured a lot in. And it's a Montevallo team. They lose 20-18, and that loss came because they were unable to convert a 2-point conversion there at the end of the game to tie. And if you look at that game last year, dating back to last season, this was a Montevallo team, went into the postseason a little bit banged up. They were having to play J.J. Evans, the star wide receiver there, Auburn commit. They were having to play him at quarterback. And in this game, down the stretch, they were able to come back, make it a game. They score there late, have a chance in the final seconds to tie the game with a 2-point conversion. And at this point in the game, in Abbott, he's hurt again. And J.J. Evans had to step up and play quarterback late in that game again. And they ended up coming up short. It was difficult because of that senior class. Deion Gilliland, J.J. Evans, Jamarius Carter, and Malik and Abbott, the quarterback there. That's an offense that was just outstanding, and they did some tremendous things there at Montevallo the last few years. They're going to get a couple of guys back. They were young on defense at a lot of positions. They still have some talent coming back at running back, the offensive line. But for that group of seniors that was just such a standout core of guys on the offensive side, it's difficult to see their season come to an end. But what a fight back for them. Couldn't be more proud of the way that they fought in that game when it looked like they were going to go down with ease for a while. And credit the defense the last few weeks for Montevallo, a defensive unit that struggled through the first part of the season, more than halfway through the season, but over the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, they really turned up the pressure, and they did so again to give themselves a chance this past Friday night. Tough end for them, but a special group of guys that are going to have a bright future ahead of them as well. But now we're on to round 2. We've got a couple of big matchups this Friday night between Briarwood, Thompson, those two teams advancing on to round 2. We're going to break both of those games down, and we're going to start with the one right here at Thompson High School. We said exactly what Thompson needed to do last week to pick up that first-round victory, and they showed it. This was a team coming off a loss to Hewitt-Trussville 2 weeks ago. They had an extra week to prepare, and you knew just with that loss going into that extra week that it was going to be tough for Austin to come out and beat Thompson, because when you give this Thompson team the talent they have an extra week and they're angry, it's just going to be tough to beat a talented team that has that chip on their shoulder. And that's exactly what Thompson showed on Friday night. And they improved every category they needed to improve on. If you look at the way that Thompson played against Hewitt-Trussville in a very close game, they only lose that game 36-29, had their chances to win despite some poor play, but the penalties killed them in that game. They had 12 penalties for 105 yards against Hewitt-Trussville. You fast forward to this past Friday night, it's a much different story. 5 penalties for just 30 yards. So when you're giving a team 105 yards in penalties, I mean, it's tough for any team to win. It doesn't matter if Alabama's playing a high school team or any college team is playing a high school team. If you give up 105 yards of penalties, it's tough to win. And then their other problem this year has been getting off the field on third down. That's what almost cost them against Mountain Brook a few weeks ago as well. But this past Friday night, they allowed just 4 third-down conversions in 12 attempts. So Thompson's defense stepped up when it needed to. The offense wasn't starting behind the 8 ball very often, and the defense wasn't giving up first downs because of dumb penalties. So big improvement in the 2 key categories that you need to see if you're a Thompson football fan, and I expect that to continue going forward. Because this team, if they can keep that same mentality that they had going into the first round coming off of that loss, they've got to play every week like that. They knew what they had to fix. They fixed it. Now it's time to continue playing that way, and they've got a chance to do it in a rematch of last year's first-round matchup as they beat Florence rather handily a season ago. Now they get them again in the second round this year, and obviously coming off a 54-20 victory over Austin, a game where Thompson led 47-7 at the halftime break. So this is a Thompson team that their offense started clicking a week ago. Their defense started to play a little bit better, and their defense has been pretty consistent throughout the season. They've only given up 30 or more to both Hoover and Hewitt-Trussville, 36 to Hewitt-Trussville and 30 to Hoover. So the defense playing well, and then the offense also playing extremely well throughout the season. But this is a Florence team that they're coming off a win against Mountain Brook this past Friday night. That's a Mountain Brook team that did test Thompson a few weeks ago, but they're able to beat Mountain Brook 24-21 in a very tightly contested game. So that's a big win for Florence momentum-wise going into this matchup. And the key thing, in my opinion, I know it was early in the season when you look at this, but Austin, the team that Thompson just dominated, actually beat Florence earlier in the season 30-25. So if that's worth anything, which I don't think it's worth much at this point in the season, the second week of the postseason, once you get to this point in the year, you've got talented teams everywhere. So it's probably not going to mean much, but at the same time, that's a head-to-head matchup with both of those teams. Thompson dominated Austin, and Florence ended up losing that game. That being said, Florence, they've started to play better the last few weeks of the season. They've won 5 games in a row now, and a big reason because of that is the way that their defense is playing. They've given up 14 or less in 3 of their last 4 games and 23 or less in that 5-game winning streak. So the defense playing well. Early in the season kind of struggled, which is why they're averaging giving up 24.7 points per game. But the defense has drastically improved for Florence, and that's going to be a key going into this matchup. But that said, this Florence team has played 2 really good offenses this year. James Clemens, one of those, which I think is a dangerous opponent in the future possibly for Thompson. It's a very good James Clemens team. And James Clemens won this game won their game against Florence 51-20. So they score 51 points, limit Florence to just 20 points. And then also to start the season, 41-14 loss for Florence against Brentwood Academy out of Tennessee. Those are by far the 2 best offenses they played this year, and they struggled not only to score or not only giving up points, but also scoring the football as well. So that's got to be a benefit for Thompson, a little bit of a confidence booster for them going into this matchup, knowing that if they're clicking and doing everything that they're supposed to, that they're going to have their chances. And that's the problem, in my opinion, for Florence. So when you look across the field on the offensive side of the ball for Thompson, you've got a quarterback in Sawyer Pate that's coming off one of his best games of the year, didn't even have to play the whole time. He went 12 of 12 this past Friday night for close to 300 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. So very efficient. He's a guy that's been that way all year. And when you have Sawyer Pate playing efficient football, he's not only playing well, he's getting the ball into playmakers' hands, and they're able to make some big plays. And you've also got a couple of running backs that can run the football and an offensive line that's improved drastically throughout the year. So when you've got a quarterback playing that efficiently, that's a big boost for a team that's got at least 4 receivers that can easily catch bomb touchdown passes, go over 100 yards, and a couple running backs to take some stress off your shoulders as well. So I expect the Thompson offense to continue that trend, show their power on the offensive side of the ball. They're going to score points in this game. And then when you look at Florence's offense, it's an offensive unit that's only scoring 26.4 points per game. It's going to be tough for them to keep up. If Thompson's clicking, if they don't give up, they don't have those stupid mistakes, those penalties, if they're able to get off the field on third down, then Florence isn't going to be moving the ball a ton. And it's going to make it tough for them to keep up with this Thompson offense, because Thompson's offense, they scored 54 last week. That's their 3rd game of the season with 50-plus points, and they've had several games so far this year where they've scored 40 or more. And that's 10 games so far this season where they've scored 40 or more points. I'm sorry, 7 of their 10 games where they've scored 40 or more. So Thompson, their offense, dynamic. Florence going to have a tough time, in my opinion, keeping up. And I think this defense has a chip on its shoulder, knowing what defenses of the past have done here at Thompson. It's a young unit, but you've got a lot of talent on that side of the ball. I think that's going to be key as well. So as long as Thompson can keep those penalties in check like they did a week ago, as long as they can get off the field on third down, then you're giving your offense a chance to be as successful as it can, and that's all you can ask for. And if they do that, I think they're going to have a strong day, and I think it's on to the semifinals of the Class 7A playoffs for the 3rd consecutive year, which is just an unbelievable story. Already to the quarterfinals now for the 3rd year in a row, but I think this Friday night they've got a great chance to punch their ticket to the semifinals yet again. The other team on to the second round, that's the Briarwood Lions, and under first-year head coach Matthew Forrester, a guy that played at Briarwood, one of the best defensive players in school history. He's been a defensive coordinator at the school for a while, still doing a lot on the defensive side of the ball, and now in his first year as head coach, he's led the Lions on to the second round of the postseason, so picked up his first postseason victory as a head coach this past Friday night. And when you're following in the footsteps of legendary Fred Yancey, that's a big thing, and it's special to watch. This is a special season that Briarwood needs to be aware of and fans need to be aware of moving forward, just simply because this could be the start of an era that's going to last a while there with Forrester at the helm. So a special first-round victory as they do take down Marbury 42-26 in a game that really wasn't even that close. You look late in that game, Marbury, they didn't give up. They were returning some big kickoffs, which set up some easy scores. But for the most part, Briarwood dominated that game on both sides of the ball. So a special first-round victory for them, and now it's on to round two and a big road trip to Jackson in what could be a strong defensive battle in this game. This is a Jackson team. It's going to be a 3-hour trip south for Briarwood, so they've got a long road trip, and then you're going in to take on a very good defensive football team. You look at both of these defenses, Briarwood giving up just 17.1 points per game, but at the same time, Jackson, they're giving up just 15.8. That's a defensive unit so far this season that has given up 7 or less 5 times so far during the 2019 season, and then even more than that, 18 or less in 7 of their 11 games. So a defensive unit that's not giving up much more than 18 points at all this season. So that's going to be tough for Briarwood's offense to be able to go in and handle. And then you look at the offensive side of the ball, Jackson just a little bit better on that side of the ball as well. They're scoring 30.4 points per game, and Briarwood is scoring just 26.1 points per game. Now, that said, this is a Briarwood team that's played an extremely difficult schedule. A Briarwood team over the last few weeks that's playing arguably its best football of the season, and they still don't think they're playing that good. And I know there's some things they need to work on, especially on the offensive side of the ball when it comes to the passing game, with some kickoff return issues on special teams the last few weeks. But at the same time, this is a team that's playing its best football of the season and is getting better and better every week. And when you don't think you're playing your best football yet, that's a dangerous combination. This is a very good Briarwood football team. A large reason for that is on the defensive side of the football, like we've said. It's a special defense, and the last few weeks we've seen why as they beat Hueytown, the number 3 team at the time in the 6A classification, 7-0, pitch a shutout in that game against a 6A team. And a couple weeks before that, they beat Ramsey 21-20, and a lot of people thought Ramsey was the number 1 team in the 5A classification, a runaway for the state championship this year, and Briarwood's able to pick up a big win, and that gives them the region championship this year. So they got the 1 seed. They went in to the first round of the playoffs with that home field advantage, and they took care of business, and now they go on to the second round. So this Briarwood team, they've been battle-tested against some very good football teams this year. Now they'll have another chance against a good football team on the road this Friday night. And while I talk a lot about the defensive side, if you look at this offense right now, and that's what continues to improve, and that's what's getting better and better, and what's dangerous, because they played so well on that side, and it can only get better, to be honest with you. I think this is a unit that could be even better moving forward if they continue to advance. But you look at what's happened the last few weeks. In that Ramsey game, Luke Pruitt goes down with an injury, the star running back who's capable of going over 100, maybe even 200 yards any given night, and he goes down with an injury in that first half, and Luke Rebels, the backup sophomore, comes in. That's a unit, those two guys, Pruitt and Rebels, the two Lukes, very close with each other. And Rebels was ready to step up in large part because of that relationship. And Rebels, he stepped up the last few weeks. He's gone over 100 yards each game himself, and that showed this past Friday night in that win against Marbury. He had 4 touchdowns on the ground and 200-plus all-purpose yards, more than 160 on the ground, and had a great game in the receiving game as well with a long touchdown reception. So Luke Rebels has stepped up and played well they've not only got Rebels and Pruitt both healthy now going into the second round, two guys that give you a backfield duo. It's going to be tough to stop, but they have one of the best offensive lines in the state blocking for them, and it showed. There was a ton of space for both of those guys to run on Friday night, and Pruitt had a strong opening drive in that game, ended up scoring the first touchdown of the night, and then he didn't have to do much the rest of the way, which allowed him to rest up a little bit more for this week. So those two guys, they're patient runners. They look for the hole, and then they hit it, and that offensive line's opening it up for them. So that combination's really dangerous. And then when you look even further on the offensive side of the football, Christopher Vizina, the freshman quarterback, he's improved every week of the season. He made big passing plays against Ramsey to win that game. He made a big passing play against Hueytown to win that game. And he also made a couple of plays in the passing game in the first round against Marbury. So a guy that continues to gain confidence and getting less and less scared to throw the football and make some tough throws into tight windows. He's improved each and every week that he's been the starter, and I expect that to continue to grow, especially with him gaining trust in that solid offensive line, gaining trust in his receiving core, especially in Blake McKenna, who's been extremely talented throughout the season and has really stepped up as a go-to target the last few weeks. So this is an offensive side that's improved. It's playing very good football right now. That combined with the defense and the way they're playing, it's a dangerous combination. This is a Briarwood team, the way they played the last few weeks, could win a state championship at the 5A level. Now, this week it's going to be tough. Jackson could easily win this game because of the way that they play defense. So this is going to be a tightly contested game, and I think it's going to be a low-scoring defensive battle. But when you have an offensive line like Briarwood has, you have two running backs like they have, they're going to be able to churn out some yards, run the clock, and I think they're going to be able to reel off some long drives that could end up winning this football game. When you're in a defensive battle, you need a good defense, and two, you need a ground game that's going to be able to churn and wear out the other defense. So I think that's what Briarwood has. I think they've got a strong chance to win this game in advance, especially since they're going to be trying to fix and really perfect everything that they can on both sides of the ball, knowing that they had some things they wanted to work on. So it's going to be an interesting game. I think either team could win, but I do think Briarwood, with both sides of the ball getting better each and every week, I think they've got a strong chance to advance on to the quarterfinals of the 5A playoffs on Friday night. It's going to be exciting to watch. It's tough that it's a 3-hour road trip for them and for the fans, but nonetheless, I expect Briarwood to put forth, if anything, a strong effort that should end with a chance to win this game. And I think they've got a great chance to do so and advance on to the quarterfinals. That's going to do it for the second round playoff edition of the Shelby County High School Football Show. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. And if this is the last show of the season, it's been a joy to do this yet again. I do think we're going to have at least one of these two teams advance on Friday night, but what more could you ask for? It's playoff time. You've got two teams into the second round of the postseason, one going to be right here on their home field, the other on the road, but a great chance to advance as well. And these two teams right now, in my opinion, playing their best football of the season with what I saw this past Friday night. And you couldn't be asking for anything more than to be clicking and still improving, too. That's the dangerous thing, is both these teams, I think, are still improving as well. So it's going to be an exciting playoff Friday night ahead. I can't wait to see what happens. We'll be live here from Thompson High School with our pregame show, so make sure you tune into that on the Shelby County Reporter Facebook page, and we'll break down both matchups, give you a little bit more in-depth preview live here on Friday night as we get you geared up with the excitement of the atmosphere and everything that's going to be going on out here at Warrior Stadium as they host a playoff matchup for the second week in a row. Look to punch their third straight ticket to the semifinals of the 7A playoffs as well. Been a joy. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on Friday night.